is 12 noon. I would like to welcome you to this Superintendent's Workshop being held at Joanne Idolette Jr. TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with any board member, please give that to our Executive Assistant, Mrs. Morey. We will take a break every 2 hours or if needed before that. Board members, there is one item I'm going to add, and that is a short discussion on homeless students. That'll be item D, okay? Other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First item is the purpose of this meeting, which is to provide the opportunity for the board to engage in conversation on the items that will eventually come for approval during a business meeting. These items have been presented to each individual board meeting during board briefings, and today is the opportunity to present to the board proper. First item on the agenda is an item that was approved by all of the board members in the, I think it was October, November of 2023, and it is to review and provide feedback on the creation and development of a classical school, also looking at K-8 models as well as a boutique high school. I'll thank in advance the staff, Dr. Shafty, Dr. Began, Ms. Basura, who have led this work. It is coming at a very unique time for us as a school system, and I don't want to take away any of the thunder from those who are presenting, but we have the opportunity to be nimble and work fast as a school system to meet the needs of our community. If you look at our enrollment from 18-19 to today's date, we're about 800 students down. That's $1.6 million that is not in our budget. When you look at October's FTE in comparison, or enrollment in comparison to the previous school year, that is 143 students down. Also, significant money that's not in our budget. The only way we have to increase money is to increase students. We have been bold in embracing choice. It was one of the first things this board approved when I got here, to ensure that we had choice across the entire system. The state has followed in embracing choice and providing multiple pathways for a parent to have the opportunity to engage in a conversation to maximize choice. Just not a charter school, but a private school can be used using public funds. The concern that I have is not the choice, but the quality of the choice. And right now, Indian River County has some outstanding choices regardless of the design or the concept, whether it is a public, whether it is a choice, whether it is a private. We as a community are in a good place. But things are changing rapidly. And any organization that would come into our community who is proffering an opportunity or hope to a family needs to be able to deliver on that hope. And as the public school system, I want to be their choice, because we will be held accountable to the outcome of all of the schools in which you all collectively govern and charge me to run. And we will be accountable not only on the outcome, but extremely public and transparent on the funds that are being used, the transportation that is being provided, and the academic outcome. The presentation today is looking at classical education. There have been 18 classical schools that have popped up in the state of Florida over the last several years. It is one of our fastest growing choices in the state of Florida. Currently, there are no public schools that are offering this design. Miami-Dade County Public Schools is in the process and will be offering one next year, so they'll get to be the ones who are first. What we are presenting today is aligned with all state statutes, all requirements, all policies. We'll spend a lot of time talking in this presentation about breaking some myths around what classical education is, and clearly defining what it is as well as what it is not. And then we will provide feedback or answer any questions board members may have. I will reserve some closing comments prior concluding to the presentation. So this time, Dr. Shafty, the floor is yours, or Ms. Basura, however you guys are doing it.
Through the chair. Good afternoon. Thank you. The team has been doing quite a bit of research around this model for the last couple of months, so Dr. Began and Dr. Shafty will present our findings.
Through the chair, open enrollment, as Dr. Moore said, in school choice really has elevated the parents' right to choose the programming that they wish for their students to experience. And here we look at the three-year assessment of school choice. And what we realize is that the highest counts of applicants unable to receive their first choice really are linked to schools with the distinct programming. The count of available choice seats is a critical variable contributing to applicants not receiving their first selection. So to quantify that, in 2023, 2024, the total count of available choice seats across all elementary schools was 616, which indicates that there were approximately 1.8 requests for each available choice seat. As we look even further analysis shows that the top 3 requested schools identified, which would have been for across elementary, Rosewood, Liberty, and Osceola Magnet, shows significant increase in the number of applicants vying for available seats. So that first choice applicants, you have about a little over 2 applications per available seat at Rosewood. Liberty is the highest at about 2.25 applications per seat, and Osceola 1.75. So we did a lot of research. What is classical education? We have on the left district public school education model in Florida, everything that we are bound by, the curriculum, the federal and state regulations, policies, testing criteria. Of course, we have Florida's resiliency standards. We have multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS. We have intervention services, ESOL services. And then when we look at the classical education model, that is built on the 3 stages of learning with a liberal arts focus. Dr. Moore did share that there are 18 classical charter schools in the state of Florida. We were able to make connections with some of those schools, some of the administrators, and research what we were able to find online as a part of the information used for this presentation. We are extremely excited towards the end of this week to visit True North Classical Academy in Miami, and they have been an A charter school since 2016. So having the opportunity to engage in a thought partner conversation with that school being so established since 2016 will be a really great learning experience for us. The classical education focuses on traditional education based on the liberal arts, including natural sciences, the canons of classical literature, the fine arts, and the history of civilization. It involves this 3-part process known as the trivium, and you'll read this sort of from the bottom to the top. The grammar stage is what you would associate for elementary school programming. It is focusing on acquiring the knowledge of basic skills, facts, songs, rhymes. A child at that age can really retain a lot of information through memorization, and that is the focus of the grammar stage. Then the logic stage builds upon that, teaching students to think through the facts and apply evidence and logic to those facts, which would be almost our middle school. And then the rhetoric stage would be upper grades, where students learn to reach conclusions, thoughtful criticisms, very much like the Socratic method, if you're familiar with that sort of instructional delivery. And then in each subject, students begin mastering the basic facts, but then they develop and learn how to reason against those facts. And then finally, learning how to argue and support their ideas creatively and persuasively. And the sequence of these concepts are important, but just as important as the scope and sequence of the curriculum. So the next overview is something we've combined looking at research for frameworks for classical education. It also embraces E.D. Hirsch's idea of cultural literacy across the classical education academies, where students must acquire those concrete skills and gain the knowledge that provides civic participation. Aligned with the trivium, effective communication requires that common foundational language. Many of the classical academies that we have researched embrace Hirsch's core knowledge sequence, and that core knowledge sequence is predicated on 2 things: that students learn a new concept, depending on what they already know, and then what students know is a function of their previous experience. So the progression from grammar to logic and rhetoric is very important in the sequencing. And then this is just a sample of what it could look like in the K-5 space. The blocks and the subjects are on the left, and the grade levels span across the top. Those are not the only available curriculum, but they provide a foundation for what the curriculum could be for those unique subjects. The cost factors was also part of the item, and there would be significant investments in the cost for year one. You would have to invest in the proper professional learning, as you would with anything, to make sure that there are curriculum maps, pacing guides aligned to and with the standards. We would probably have to account for salaries for teachers. Depending on the coursework, it could be adjuncts. And then the instructional materials. So just some historical benchmarks. Last summer, we spent approximately $111,000 in professional learning aligned with the ELA best standards. So you could use that as an anchor for the costs. Also, we may have to have fees associated with classical education. For example, the IB annual fee is about $12,000 to have that level of accreditation. And then there would be some rebranding and update work to the actual selected campus, and just historical rebranding costs. We updated and changed signage at one of our middle schools. That cost approximately $100,000. And then historical upgrades to the school facade, again, a recent cost for that, flooring, sidewalk replacements, any of those things, we spent approximately $30,000. The cost, if we are selecting a school that is a choice school without boundaries, we would save on these costs due to anything we would have had to pay for transportation. And if fully enrolled, FTE would fund a significant amount, and it would provide an opportunity to really maximize student enrollment at one of our selected location. Here's our proposed timeline. It is proposed because we want to hear your feedback, and then a critical layer of this timeline will be the feedback from our community. We have May and June of this year. We want to survey parents in the community to assess the interest in this model as a school choice option. We would like to report back the findings to the board in June and report on the boundary adjustment plan that would be needed once the selected location and interest is established. August 2024, we would begin an instructional materials review. That is again for community members, parents to have a say. We would submit the bid for publishers to submit their materials and conduct a full instructional materials review starting in August. We just went through that with social studies, so we know we would want to start that sooner than later. November would be open enrollment, and students within the boundary would have the right of first refusal. The school year 25-26, we would open in a phased-in approach for kindergarten and first grade at an elementary school, and then each subsequent year we would expand 2 grade levels until we would be K-5, 27-28. You see in there we would have to conduct some master planning because everything would impact enrollment at other locations, and we would want to assess the impact of an expansion potentially to a K-8 model in this same proposed timeline. So following this, it is 100% proposed that we would have by year 8 years out, school year 2030-31, a K-12 classical education school. That should say school, not elementary. We are committed in this approach to adhere to state law and board policy, and how we would do that, we would continue our MTSS process. We know that's a non-negotiable expectation to meet the needs of all students who wish to attend this school, individualized education programs, and then knowing that ethics and character education is a major tenet in classical education, we would rely on the state's innovative resiliency standards to make sure that lessons impart the values of things like responsibility and goal setting. So other pieces of this briefing included the K-8 school model. If we were to do this right now, it would be a tremendous cost. With Mr. Green's help, we were able to cost out, if we were looking to expand to K-8 right now, the cost of an existing wing would be approximately $1.4 million. And when you combine that with interest, debt, and future payments, over 25 years, that wing would cost us about $18 million. The finance has been such a pivotal focus area that we believe the cost-benefit calculation to a K-8 right now would hinder the district infrastructure and current capital improvements in our planning process. The boutique and technical high school is quite an interesting method as well. If you picture something like academies with a focus area where the learning environment has personalized coursework, almost like an acceleration for college and career, there is a really unique opportunity that we have before us to have a boutique and technical high school. Partnerships would be community partners, organizations, and really relying on innovative areas of aeronautics, healthcare, manufacturing. Esports has become very popular, and maritime. The model would offer smaller classes, almost like that college experience, and then students could go select an elective or vocational credit that they would be able to use for college, career, or trade. The facility would resemble a workspace, very much like our CTE classes. And Treasure Coast Technical College currently offers multiple career and tech program pathways, and we would really be able to leverage that with a boutique and technical high school, being the only, I think, technical college on the Treasure Coast. And it would offer a really unique opportunity for our community partners and some of the partnerships that we could really leverage here to make sure that we're connecting the mission to really inspire and empower all of our students. As with all of these models, it would provide a unique pathway for our parents to select a model that they would feel would best meet the needs of their student learning experience.
So just as she closes, and thank you again, Dr. Shafty, Dr. Began, a lot of conversations about what this is, but the reality is it is not. It is a political school. The answer is no, that is not factual. It is a school solely based on religion. No, that is also not accurate. The school is only for certain people. That is also not accurate. We have policies in place in order to ensure that if we move to a magnet school without boundaries, because there is a very clearly defined need to do so, to maintain our enrollment, to maintain employees, not to have a reduction in force, we have to be aggressive. This would be a school for all children, following the choice process that you all have already created. It is an opportunity that I believe we have as a school system to meet what I believe is a very clearly defined need in our community. We cannot let the bureaucracy of a public school system destroy the public school system. We need to be nimble. We cannot be the taxi company and allow private and choice to be Uber and Lyft. The public school system that's going to be successful in 7 and 8 years out is going to have to embrace flexibility, embrace being nimble and quick, to be in response to what is a ultra competitive, which is the right thing to do, competitive environment to educate children. There are 18 schools across the state over the last 6-7 years who are providing this to their community. What we're asking the board to do is to allow us to go out to our community and survey what classical education is, to validate what I believe to be true, that there is in fact an opportunity, there is an appetite for a fourth magnet school, because basically for every one application received, another student is being turned away. It's a 2-to-1. We have 1 seat for every 2 children that are applying to go into our schools. In bringing that back to the board, which would be June, we would provide, these are the plans, this is the specific school. We would outreach to the specific community. As Dr. Shafty said, we are not going to move anyone's apple cart over the course of a transition. If you are currently in a school, you can continue in that school in the same design that you're currently being educated until you exit out. No one's being displaced. If you are in the boundaries of a specific school that is selected, you would have the opportunity to say yes or no first before we opened it up to full choice. While at the same time, it provides us the opportunity to increase enrollment and to maximize enrollment at schools. We as a board cannot have schools that run at 50%. We can no longer afford to do that. I think this is one feasible solution to address that very specific concern that must be addressed. In coming back to the board, we will have a fully vetted plan on creating a K-8 model over the course of time. So any child who enters this program when it opens in K or first grade, as you transition into sixth school, the intent would be that there would be a 6 through 8 model available at that specific site. And then in year 4 or 5 of the plan, we would conduct, prior to that year 4 or 5, a complete feasibility study, a master plan, and we're waiting to do it at that specific time because we collectively need to have a better understanding as to the impact of choice. So we need to create a plan to determine, do we still need to have 4 middle schools? In 4 years from now, is that going to be a reality? Can one of them be transitioned into that boutique high school? We have the only technical college on the Treasure Coast. Are there opportunities to expand programming to include a high school component in that specific environment? That allows us to also address that specific issue. So that would address all of the items for the board. At this time, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, Madam Chair.
Board members?
I'll go last. I have questions. I'll go last. I usually go first. I'll go last.
Okay, go ahead, Doc.
First of all, thank you for all of this information, detailed information. I too have been trying to research and review everything I can about classical school, classical education. And for me, I think it's going to come down to visiting one and looking at it. I think, Dr. Moore, you said that there was going to be one in Miami that would be classical public school coming this year, correct?
Correct. They had an item very similar come to their staff. They're probably 3 or 4 months ahead of us in their timeline. And we did reach out and have conversations with them about the research that they have done.
But there are classical public charter schools.
Yes, one of which we are visiting this Friday.
Right. And you're right, there's a lot of questions and concerns about this. So again, for me, it's just going to be hands-on and visual, take a look at what's going on. And asking our community, I think, is very, very important with the survey. But I also think when we ask in the survey, we should have more than just one example. What could it look like if we're going to do a magnet school? And it's a classical magnet school, is that what we would be calling it? Or would there be another theme that goes along with it?
Through the chair, there's 2 things that I, prior to receiving feedback from the board, we need to, validate there is an interest, even though the data says that there is, for a second non-boundaried magnet school.
Okay.
We have basically 2 in the south, 1 in the north. That's straightforward. And then what I would do is assess initially, yes, this is what classical education is. This is some research on what it is. This is what it is not. Is there interest in having this specific model based on what is being provided to the community to evaluate? And then from there, bring that information back to the board with a comprehensive plan.
So if we choose a certain elementary school to be this area, those who are already there would have first choice to stay.
Correct.
Because we've done it a little bit differently with magnet schools throughout the years. And then after that, we would do school choice lottery like we are doing now.
It would adhere to the same exact procedures as the 3 current elementary magnet schools.
When we're looking at the future also with the number of students we've lost and going into a year without ESSER funds, and we're looking at professional development, how will we be getting that money to truly start a magnet school like this?
So through the chair, the quick and dirty of the cost analysis is, it costs a heck of a lot more money to run a half-empty school than it does to provide additional training and development to have a fully staffed school. So we're bleeding out with half-full schools. So yeah, there would be some initial upfront cost, and some of it would be embedded costs, meaning we're going to do professional development every summer for all of our schools. This development may look a little bit different based on the theme and the concept, but it doesn't extend the cost. So in the end of the day, there's two major cost savings. Full schools, meaning the children at the school fund the principal's position, the assistant principal's position, the counselor's position, the custodian's positions. We have schools right now in which we basically have to take money from other schools to fund a half full school. The other is being full choice. You're reducing transportation costs because you're not running boundaried transportation, because it is the magnet school is provide your own transportation. We'll still do the depots, but those are built upon established routes.
And you mentioned this would obviously follow our guidelines with the representation of our diversity as we have in our magnet schools now.
Absolutely. Right now, that is board policy as it relates to the current magnet schools.
Dr. Moore, what would be the difference now with our, let's say, elementary? We have Amplify and we're teaching the standards. What would they do differently in a classical school? And I know I'm getting into details and I'm going to have to see it, and I'll go, but can anybody help me with that?
I attempt to answer that question. I didn't do as good as I would like to hold myself accountable. Let me have Dr. Shafty answer that question.
How would it be any different, if you will?
So that could be your unique curriculum for literature. We actually, I say we, Dr. Began has done a fantastic job connecting with a school who uses Amplify, because Amplify is CKLA, core knowledge, based on the tenets that could be aligned to classical education, but you would need some distinct additional supporting curriculum like grammar. You would need probably something to connect it stronger to and with civics. So we would look at the framework that we displayed there and make sure that we have supporting curriculum to meet the needs of the scope and sequence of a similar framework like that. Amplify, our blocks typically are English language arts blocks where there is a unique mix of writing, reading, speaking, where these blocks would be very intentional with the scope and sequence of responding to literature, how we approach the pedagogy of really being hands-on, students having their own materials that they are text coding, not so much of a reliance on the digital aspect of how we deliver instruction like STEAM programming would be, but it's the approach to making sure that we are aligned to the memorization, the facts, and the core subject areas that are represented in classical education.
Okay, who wrote the curriculum?
Who wrote?
I mean, we're looking at Amplify, but other things that are added to classical, who's the sponsor of that? Who wrote it?
There are various models. Great books would be some of the literature pieces we see for math over and over again. We're seeing Singapore math.
Is it in Singapore?
Yep.
Okay. Now, what I do want to say is I understand we're in a competitive world, 100%. And yes, I want our certified teachers teaching this. That is a given. I'm very, very proud of this public school system, but I keep getting a lot of questions on it. When we look at preparing for the future with our students, and none of us can really predict it, with less technology, how are we preparing our students? And I know technology has some really good parts and some parts we have to be careful of. But with less technology, how are we improving our students as they go into that K-8 boutique high school model? Because that's our future.
Dr. Shep, you want to talk through the design? You want to talk through the design? No.
So technology is still embedded in these schools, but it wouldn't be the main way that you deliver instruction. So you would not walk into a classroom and see like a Canvas or some sort of learning management platform where kids are solely interacting with that. the knowledge really should come from the instructor in these spaces. But it's not to say that you're not going to see technology,
Right.
but it's not going to be the way in which the content is delivered first.
Got it. Okay, and again, I'm just going to have
No,
to
no,
look.
no,
I mean, I'll be going to one of the
Trust the
schools.
parent.
I want to see it. I'm sorry, I'm visual, I'm kinesthetic, and I want to see and be able to express to our parents what this is. You know what I
Field
mean?
trip.
So they would not have a one-on-one model like our kids do
They,
now.
they could.
They could,
They
okay.
could, and that would be the beauty of us as a school district, being able to still adhere to the tenets of classical education while embedding things to still meet the needs of that student population at that school.
And I remember when this came up, Ms. Berenborg made an amendment, and I'm glad she did, because, you know, we've been talking about K-8. We've been talking about boutique high school. I'm always talking about looking at better and more pre-K for our students, because I think that's very, very important. Now, I looked at the the components. I believe they're grammar, critical learning, and abstract learning. So you're looking at basically elementary, middle, high school as we move forward with that. A lot of memorization. Can you just be a little bit more specific on that?
Sure. So honestly, it reminds me of how I went
I
to
know,
school.
I can,
so
ask me what to say, I'll tell you, I memorized it.
I hear classical, but it's to me very a traditional school where I would anticipate that there are spelling lists, you are breaking apart sentences, identifying the subject and the predicate. It is a traditional approach to learning that some students can be very responsive to that model, as can some of our teachers who enjoy delivering instruction through very similar blocks, but it's visually very much how I went to school.
Yeah, I know, yeah, me too.
Had a grammar book, a spelling book.
Oh, I know,
you know.
taught grammar. I'll probably have a few more questions, I let board members do this, but I just want to make sure that when we are doing our survey for our parents, I'm sorry, Doug, did you answer, will there be another theme with this magnet or just classical school?
That is the thing.
I think the initial intent is to assess classical first, and if we have validation that classical there is a true demand for it, my recommendation would be that we move forward with classical. Now, if it comes back being something different, then we would look at other models. I have, just in doing a number of surveys, if you're asking someone to compare something that they do not yet see or can touch or be a part of versus something that there is, your data is not going to be reliable. Because I know this model or we have this current kind of school, they're going to tend to go towards what they know versus what they don't know. So I believe you have to assess first independently the unknown based on the descriptions in which we provide, so it is in fact valid. Comparing one thing that doesn't exist to something that does exist
Right.
would not provide reliable data.
And so you're looking for, if you really look toward the future, because we've talked about a K-8 model, you're looking at that to be K-12, like located at the boutique high school, or?
Through a K-8 model that would take whatever this thing ended up being right now, assessing classical, would take you through 8th grade. Because very similar to IB. IB, you start at Liberty, you go to Sebastian,
Yep.
you go to Sebastian Senior.
Right.
It is structured differently than the traditional honors class or AP class that they're taking. Same model holds true. So we need to be consistent to the model just as we are in IB. So where it would end up in the 9-12 space would be an answer that we would have in year 4 or 5 based on the PowerPoint.
Have you done any research on those that have been basically K-12? I know obviously they're charter or private, and how those students are doing in college or anything like that?
So I can answer that question two ways. My personal response, I have one daughter who graduated through homeschool, and this is how she was educated. And she is the world's best. And then I have one daughter who was homeschooled but then returned in 9th grade and had a traditional high school experience and thrived
Yep.
at Beach High School. So Is it for everybody? No, but is it for people who want to assess and say, this is the best way to educate my specific child? And if it is, then we need to have a choice for that. That's a roundabout question. I think you need to stay true to the model all the way through, very similar to IB. In the 18 schools, I don't know that there is, I know in Miami at True North, they have a high school component. Dr. Began, you may have schools from your previous role that were into the secondary level.
So through the chair, my answer to that would be the schools that we've researched. They are adding grade levels into secondary each progressive year. And the results have been tremendous, both from an academic perspective as well as a retention perspective. I think the piece in specific to students, they are continuing to add additional cohorts just based on the demand. So they have between 30 and 50 students for each of those cohorts. And the schools they are building additional campuses just based on the demand that they've had.
Okay, so I'll end with this part. We still must teach the state standards. It's not connected to any religion. Is that correct? Okay. We will have the diversity that we are bound to have by school board policy. There was one other thing. What else did you say it was not? I'm sorry. It is not political.
It
It
is
is
open
not
for all.
open
So
for all?
just to rephrase it, we have a school board policy that mirrors our magnet schools aligned to the overall enrollment of our county, which all schools are in compliance with. I think done correctly, that's not even an issue. We will adhere to the state standards. That's part of the identifying of curriculum and the creating of what would be our pacing guide, scope and sequence frameworks that we would use. And we will be accountable to those specific outcomes. These students at the end of every year will still have to take the FAST assessment, and done correctly, as it is in a lot of the IB programs, that FAST assessment becomes secondary to the drive and the depth of the instruction that we're providing. Will supersede the state assessments. But ultimately, yes, your teachers will in fact be certified. The outcome, the academic growth will all be displayed based on the state's grading system.
And like I said, I would like to visit a school. I'll do that on my own after your recommendation, but was Latin involved? Again, this is my notes, Latin.
Yes, Dr. Schaffer, you want to speak some Latin?
I do not want to speak Latin, but thank you for the offer. But there would be a focus on the Latin roots or the Greek roots that help.
The Latin roots, okay. Yeah, because I took French in high school and I should have taken Spanish, I'm telling you. That's all for now, thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Tosca?
Latin helps a lot for medical
Yes, it
education. So I'll give you that. I think based on the data you've presented and the research, from a needs assessment standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense to continue to explore the idea of a classical education track. And I think if we're looking at how we can grow this district into the future, it makes sense to grow it in a way that the community is going to want to be a part of that. And so this offers something in a cutting edge way that is not offered generally in public school districts. So I think it's pretty cutting edge. I think it's something that I'd be very happy for us to do as a district. And then additionally, the technical high school and potentially offering technical trade classes in our high schools is something I very much support. And how we can go about doing that is something I think we should continue to look at as well. Because I do think prioritizing and making sure it's available attracts into trades and technical education, I think is critical for our kids' future. There's a lot of kids who would be better off going to a trade school than the normal university track. And we need to make sure they have the option available to them and can maybe realize it early enough in their education they can take advantage of it. So I look forward to the continued research that we're going to be doing over the next few months, and I support it.
So thank you so much for taking this on and for doing the research. I know that you all have been working really hard to present this today, so I am have to contain my excitement on this topic because we're not quite there yet. But some of the things that Dr. Jones questioned, I'd just like to piggyback off of. Classical learning does not, as you mentioned, Dr. Shafty, does not take away any of the technology. I think you coined it perfectly when you said it's not the main gist of how students receive the instruction. You know, it's not the main thing. It's not the main medium, I should say. But it would be, because we have a policy that is one-on-one here. Technology is one-on-one for students, and that shouldn't change. I do have a question about the finances. One of the questions, the way that you positioned this in your proposition, Dr. Moore, it seems as if the finances, and that you said there would be a slight cost for opening up this new school, but we're not building a new building. So, and if we were to reduce 1 or 2 schools and put them in one currently that we have, and then keep that one building and just kind of rename it, rebrand it for a classical school in our district, and as you said, it costs more to run a half-empty school than it does to have a fully functioning school. It seems to me that it would just be more of realignment of where those funds are going, because that school would still be in effect running as it is with the need of whatever curriculum it would be using if it were a traditional public school. Whereas you're just moving students, you're not moving funding really. It's just going to be funding under a different name and different category kind of thing. Is that right? Is that a good way of kind of?
Through the chair, that is accurate. There would be some, the branding doesn't, that would be a new additional cost.
Yeah.
Some of the purchase of the curriculum would be a minor cost. Some of the bringing the staff in, like we do in other schools, to help create the framework. So we want them to be a part of it, which is that's the most exciting thing for me. If, you know, whoever the principal ends up being, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to design and create a school from scratch. That's like a dream come true. Mm-hmm. And to do it with your staff, oh my gosh, so much fun. But the cost is not a barrier or an obstacle or a burden on us at all.
Okay.
So you're basically correct.
Okay, and really initially, if we were to open up a classical school, I think the thought was to begin with a K through 3, and then every year adding a grade. Is that kind of where your mindsets are? Anyone? Or you're just gonna?
It was K1.
K1.
And the intention there is to be able to continue to provide for the current K and 1 students in 2, 3, and 4. Okay. The opportunity, if they choose not to have this design, they can stay at that particular school and have kind of the parallel track of the traditional education we're already providing.
Okay, so it certainly would be, you know, very small cost for curriculum for a K and 1, to begin a K and 1.
Correct.
Okay, and one of the other concerns or questions that I think Dr. Jones asked had something to do with what the classical school really is, or a classical model really is. And I just want to reiterate the importance of having the classical curriculum, which really makes a school classical. It's the curriculum and how it is used. It's the framework around the curriculum that the students are using that sets them apart, because then otherwise it's just another public school. If you don't use classical curriculum, then what's the point? Latin, by the way, I think I wouldn't want to speak it either. just wouldn't. But I think that if I could change anything homeschooling my son, I think I would have put him in Latin because his vocabulary, you know, I think there are a lot of benefits to it. Dr. Posca mentioned it, you know, eventually there's a lot of Latin, and because Latin is such a dead language, it's not changing. So that's why a lot of medical fields and even the legal field, I'm sure Mr. Ansbacher can attest to that, you know, use a lot of Latin as their root phrases in terminology and stuff like that, I think. So, and also with the SAT, let's not forget about SAT scores. And now we have the classical learning test, which is also approved by the Florida Department of Education as an approved alternative to the traditional SAT or the ACT that high school students can take to get into college. And that classical learning test aligns with classical curriculum. So it really does speak on or really address, you know, the rhetoric and some of the other concepts that are provided in the classical education model. Most importantly are the great books that you mentioned, the great literature, you know, Shakespeare, and I don't have the list, I do have a list here, but as a sample, but some of those are captured within the classical learning test that I think is a perfect, you know, parallel, I guess, you know, or a connector for these students once they get through 12. We talked about going K-12, and you stopped at K-8 in this presentation. So what happens to our students in 8th grade? I thought we were going to go K-12.
Through the chair, the intent is to get to K-12.
Okay, I might have
In year
missed that.
5, we would make that decision. Classical learning test also, you mentioned it, but it's also approved by the Florida Department of Education to use as a concordance score for graduation, just as the SAT or ACT is. And our principals are reporting that we're finding great success with our current students as they take that assessment in order to allow them to graduate from high school, meeting the requirements.
Yeah. So that's good. So the classical learning test also has annual, I guess you can call them diagnostic tests, which students, especially in the classical learning, it could be for anyone can take them, but they really do help for the lower grades. So it's not just the test that you take to go into college, but you can take them. I think they start at like 6th grade. I'm not sure about 3rd grade. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, you can do the research on that. But again, that seems to be a good thing to consider when you're proposing the next proposal that you bring to us in the summer or whenever it is, how we can kind of embed the classical learning test in the framework of whatever you're going to present to us. Okay, so the cost benefit. One of the, what I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard was that the cost benefit to having a K-8 is $5.9 million. I think I saw that in the slide. I might be wrong if I'm saying that. If I'm correct or wrong, correct me. But what would be the cost benefit of having a K-12?
Through the chair, we'd have to do that research.
Okay.
That's not the research that we did.
Okay. Okay. Also, the classical, let's assume that we're going to open up a new school, classical magnet school. This school in my mind, doesn't necessarily, because it would be somewhat boutique, it doesn't necessarily have to be similar in size to our current elementary schools, correct? You can have a small classical that's still an attractor school, and it still increases choice and increases enrollment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a 500 pupil school, correct?
It does not have to, but I think that's going to be the demand.
Okay. And, okay. So I'm going to just talk a little bit now on the instructional review process for the curriculum moving forward. And I know it might be a little too early to bring this up now, but I do, again, I've mentioned before, I have concerns about Amplify, because I know you only had that up there as a sample, so I'm not assuming that that's going to be, you know, what we are going to adopt. But I just have concerns about Amplify, only that Amplify may or may not is my concern, may not have or include within the curriculum some of the great books or great literature pieces that are needed for some of these other. So that's the part there that we need to be careful about, is if we are going to embed like the CLT exam as a diagnostic throughout the year for some of our kids, then we really need to keep the literature part of it as classical as possible. Not saying Amplify is bad, Amplify is great, but in this particular school environment, it might be better to stick with a traditional classical literature-based curriculum. And then finally, I'll just say some of the concerns over, again, what classical is that sets it apart differently than traditional public. I mean, you did a great job there, but I think logic and rhetoric and philosophy, other than the Latin piece of it, are very, very embedded within the framework of classical. So that logic is that critical thinking piece, the reasoning, the inferences, the study of thought, essentially. You know, I know we've heard of, you know, teach students how to think, don't teach them what to think. That really comes out of this whole idea of logic, or really the definition of logic. And then the rhetoric piece of it is really the art of effective speaking and writing. And, you know, I know script, people have talked about, you know, learning how to write script again. That's embedded within the classical, you know, education model. Speech and debate, compositional strategies and techniques are embedded in that. Economics is embedded in it. Obviously, we've talked about civics being civics-minded, but the respect and discipline and studiousness about, you know, around classical education, all of that, you know, traditional teacher-led methods of instruction, all of that is really, it creates the environment of the success for classical. Lastly, Dr. Jones did mention how are other schools doing. I know you had up there, I think it was Brandon McCoy, you had a quote from Brandon McCoy. I did a Google search and I came up with Brandon McCoy's issue brief on classical education. And there were 3 classical schools that were in this issue brief: Nashville Classical Charter School, and the results, because Dr. Jones wanted to know the results, South Bronx Classical was in there, and there was a third one, Washington Latin Public Charter School. The South Bronx Classical Curriculum, or the South Bronx Classical School, Education School in New York City, in this report, it says that for results, it begins with Latin is a gateway language to cultures around the world, languages whose influence spans continents such as Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, all are rooted in Latin. Second, long points, these are in their results. Second, long points to research showing that learning Latin correlates to higher SAT scores. And then, of course, third, according to long, Latin signifies elite status. There's no reason these kids can't, of course, think for themselves. But in the results, they not only greatly surpass neighboring schools, but are positive outliers for New York State. And New York, of course, has millions of students in their school system. In Nashville Classical, I will share that it does say, compared with other public schools in the area, Nashville Classical more than doubles its students' proficiency rates in math, 64.5% versus 29.9%. That's incredible. And nearly doubles their proficiency rates in ELA from 49.2% versus 25.9%. Black students in Nashville Classical also achieve far higher rates of proficiency in ELA and math compared to their counterparts. The student body itself is a majority minority. 62% are listed as Black and 8% are listed as Hispanic. Given the given the results that Nashville Classical produces, of course, the goals are to ensure excellence is celebrated and excellence is essentially reached. So there are schools that are doing it successfully. I'm excited to see where this would go. I want you to go ahead and do the research, do whatever you have to do. When you bring this to us, again, I guess in the summer, or whenever you bring the results, is that going to be the moment where you bring to us a full proposal? Is that the goal?
The goal is to bring an action item.
An action item?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted. So right now, we're not doing an action item, we're just blessing you with the work to go forth and, you know, do the research and do the surveys and so on.
Yeah, that's the board unanimously approved this briefing, which in my mind directs the work moving forward. And there'll be no shifts or change in practice. Any shifts or change in practice would come through that action item, in which I would be seeking approval from the board to, establish the full-on choice school, to begin the work to shift or modify boundaries, conduct those town hall meetings. It will be a rather large briefing because it's just not one thing, it's multiple things, very similar to the start timed, but it will be an action item that will allow us to go and do the work based on what we've already found and what we will continue to find.
And I'm sorry, just as you're talking, I thought, what about our grants department? Writing grants or receiving grants to offset some of the finances in this rebranding that we may need, or some of the budgetary concerns that might come about.
Through the chair, already doing that research, and it would be negligent of us not to do that. There are plenty, Magnet Schools of America would be an example, where they could provide additional funding for a startup of a magnet school. So we've been working with them and trying to put proposals in with Magnet Schools of America through Dr. Erickson. So that may be one of the things that we pursue in trying to find basically a startup money or additional funding to offset the minimal expense we would have.
Thank you.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. All right, couple things. Latin. So took a lot of Latin embedded courses, so a lot of prefixes and suffixes, but not true Latin. Wish I had, because I agree with you. I think it's a language that our language is based on Latin. You know, I went to the Universitas Virtutis Montis, which is the University of the Green Mountains, which a lot of colleges use Latin in their language of their college. So it's not dead. It is an older language that's still being based on other languages are based on it. So it is truly an important thing for people to at least learn the roots and the suffixes so that they understand, especially if they're going into medicine or something like that, they understand what they're talking about. So I'm all for that. The question I had about Latin is, who's going to teach it? Is it going to be embedded roots and suffixes into the curriculum that's there, and any teacher can be prepped to do that, or do we need to hire an adjunct teacher to teach Latin? Because that's not something everybody's trained to do.
Through the chair, Mr. Green can learn things really quick, so he, no, we don't have an answer for that, but I think we can be creative in finding a solution.
Okay. Singapore math. We had it here a couple of years ago, and I had friends that taught with Singapore and loved it, and the parents loved it. It was a lot of drill and practice. Some parents didn't love it. But then again, if it's a magnet school and the parents know that's what's coming, that's great. I think and it gave great results. So I'm all for bringing Singapore math back. Religion. So I took a course when I was in a public middle school called, oh gosh, what was it called? World Cultures. And we studied cultures and the religion that they practiced. I thought it gave me a really good indication of learning tolerance and acceptance of other people. And so if that's what we're looking at, to learn about the cultures and the religions of lots of different places, I think that's a great thing to do, versus learning scripture and everything else. So that's the part where I think we'd get in trouble. Mostly teaching tolerance and acceptance. I think that's key. So thank you for investigating this, but also the K-8, which we've been kind of talking around. You know, there are K-8s out there that we compete with, and I think bringing in that slowly where we can afford it would be great, because we lose kids because of traditional middle schools, not for everybody. You know, think about how many fifth graders we have. I'd like that number, actually. How many fifth graders do we have, and then how many sixth graders do we have in our middle schools? That would be an interesting number to look at, because are we losing them when they're going there?
Through the chair, the variance, I've asked that question 4 years ago and ask it every single year. The variance isn't as high as you think it would be, but what is high is the academic outcome from a fifth grade to a sixth grade.
Yep.
The transition, which this year principals have done an amazing job of creating in-school concepts for each of their sixth graders. So their sixth graders are all housed in one specific building using a teen concept. So we're not going to see it as drastic as we have in previous years, trying to combat what the data is telling us. So the number of fifth graders to sixth graders isn't overly significant. But when a parent we reduce the decision points, meaning if I get into this school and it takes me all the way through 8th grade, the opportunity to exit the public school system is eliminated because you don't have the decision to make from 5th to 6th. And I agree, middle school is a great space, but not for all.
And, you know, look at our academic loss that we have when that tradition, think about every time a student moves from one school to another school, even in elementary school, you know, when I was a principal and I have kids that were transient and then had 5 schools in 1 year, you know, they were so far behind because of that loss. Same thing kind of happens when they go from 5th grade to 6th grade and then from 8th grade to 9th grade. That adjustment is a real issue. You know, I taught middle school, we had team approach, but we also had only those kids. So I had like 120 kids that I worried about, not 500 kids, which was great because I knew them all and all the teachers, you know, met with all the parents and everything. So I thought it was a great thing to do. Looking at a K-8, I've taught at a K-8. I thought it was going to be a little nerve-wracking, especially the K-8 that we kind of moved from an F school. I thought it was going to be rough having 8th graders with little kids. It was the opposite. They really look out for them. They're like big brothers and sisters. They take care of those little kids because they were those little kids at that school some point before it when the school eventually got older. So I think that K-8 model is really important because that movement and transition is not easy for a lot of kids. So the less transition and movement we can do would be better. And the teachers all know the kids for longer. So that helps too, obviously. Music program. If we're doing a classical school, are they going to learn classical music? So would they have a string program?
It really depends on some of the schools that we've looked at. So there could be a fine arts focus, a visual arts focus, performing arts focus, but it's some sort of extracurricular that would be unique to the school. The example we found would be art and music. They'd learn the history, theory, and practice in that grammar stage and then start to apply it as they move through the progression of grammar, logic, rhetoric.
Okay.
Still physical education.
That makes sense. And then, you know, grants were mentioned, but how about an appropriations bill?
Ooh.
Because we've got a governmental body that is very into more conservative action. And this is a more conservative action. So I think bringing an appropriations bill to our representatives would be a really good course of action. I think it would be very well received.
Outstanding idea. And I would, although you just had the idea like 4 seconds ago, I think for that K-8 model might be,
Actually, I've been batting it around for a while with some people, yeah. But I think appropriations bill is the way to go. As we're doing this, align it with our legislative platform and work on trying to get an appropriations bill for this. It's not easy to get appropriations through, but I think this one might be a really good one to ride on.
we were 1 for 1, so let's,
Yeah, there you go. That's all I have.
Great.
One more thing.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
outstanding idea.
Classical learning tests, and I have talked to principals about some students graduating with that. Who, in the classical curriculum I keep hearing about, who creates the classical learning test, classical curriculum? Is there a publisher? Just so I continue to study?
Ms. Basura, I don't have the immediate response, but it is the assessment that is coming from the specific organization, just as the SAT is,
Okay,
ACT
all right.
is. So it's not, it is
It
a very
just-
specific normed reference test that they all are taking the exact same test.
Right, and I remember Dr. McMahon giving me the number. There were some that did it because of that. I'm glad for the graduation. And again, once you see some good school that you think I could visit?
Oh, absolutely.
I'd like to do that.
And I would recommend all board members to, if we can find one, there's Pineapple Cove that is in Brevard
Brevard,
County.
yes.
There's one that is in, although it wasn't recommended that we visit that specific one. Let us do that research, and I'll definitely extend that invitation.
And I want to say one thing Ms. Berenberg just said. I was talking to Representative Brackett about something the other day. He said, look at appropriations, Doc. I said, okay. It was something else.
Yeah,
I love
I
it.
actually talked to him a little bit about this, too. When you mentioned that visiting schools, though, you would have it so that board members would go separately to those schools, right?
It doesn't really,
We can do a field trip if you.
You can do that, you
if
can notice it, as long
advertise
as
it.
you're not,
Okay.
I mean, once again, we can't let the
Yeah.
bureaucracy get in the way of us.
No, I know, but I'm just
No.
saying, put it out there in the,
All right.
Yeah.
Thank, and I do want to thank, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to, just comment on the appropriations bill or the suggestion for that. I think it is a great idea. The mastery learning, there was something about mastery learning. I've talked about that quite a bit with math specifically, that are, and I don't know if you remember, the math portion of many of our textbooks are very, very busy. So pages, there's lots of stuff on it. My son was getting very, very confused and overwhelmed with some math curriculum, early on in his elementary school days that I didn't even realize it was causing him a lot of frustration and he couldn't get it. Until one day, he just said, the page is just too busy, Mom. And so that's where my light bulb went off, and I found Matthew C., which is in Singapore, but Matthew C., the pages, I'm telling you, it works, this mastery learning. The pages are just examples of the actual skill that is learned, right? The lesson, the skill that is learned. There's like 15 pages of skill that needs to learn to apply to different examples. And then at the end, there's some spiral activities where you go back and you kind of review some of the prior. But by then, he has mastered that current skill. Whereas in tradition, other math textbooks, they're doing 20 pages of spiraling and only a little bit of that mastery work. So it's, for my son, it was just too much. It was like, I just need to learn the skill for this particular math lesson and then go back. And it worked. I mean, he has taught himself, all the way through up until, through algebra and wherever he is now. It works, especially for students who are ADHD, who have that the page, just the things that are on the page when it's too busy, you can't think, straight. You're like, what am I supposed to do first? And the pages are very simple. There's lots of space in there. I'm getting nodding. There's lots of space in there to actually do the example on that page instead of having 3 different or rewriting it in a notebook. It matters. It makes a big difference. And I'm pushing this issue again because I don't believe that our district or any district should only adopt one math textbook, which is what we do. We adopt only one and everybody learns from that one. I have always been of the mindset that we should have at least 2, so that in the classroom, if a student is stuck on, you know, whatever the chapter is, if they're stuck, you can always pull from, and I'm just going to use Matthew C as an example, you can pull from Matthew C and just have them learn that mastery skill and then return back to where the class is. Or just let them have, that's differentiating instruction, right? Giving the student what they need, and we have to address our math issues as a district, just in general. So that's something that I think moving forward, especially with curriculum and instruction, like we really need to rethink how math is taught and what we're providing to students in the math classrooms. Lastly, with regard to Latin is dead or not dead, I just want to pull this up here. The Times of India says that like other languages such as Sanskrit and Greek, Latin does not have any native speakers, giving it the title of dead language. The Britannica, why is Latin a dead language? A dead language is one where it's no longer learned as the first language or used in ordinary communication. Ancient Language Institute disagrees with that, which is fine. It says that it's not that your teachers deliberately lied to you. They simply repeated the widely circulated claim that they also heard somewhere else. But it doesn't actually state that someone is actually speaking Latin today. So I think that's where I came from when I said Latin is dead, is that it's not a spoken language. It's not a native spoken language that's, you know, you go to a country and you'll hear it being spoken today.
So,
From the legal standpoint, though, right, from the legal standpoint, doesn't it help, even from the medical standpoint, doesn't it help, you know, when you're using it, because it's not changing, you know, grammar is not changing, syntax isn't changing, the dictionary definition of some of them are not changing. Those things are not changing, which could change in any other language, correct?
It helps. You get to use cool phrases.
Yeah, but it's still being used today in our, you know, for, you know, vocabulary development and SAT development, all that, you know, so, I mean, it's still being used, which is interesting. But anyway.
What is Latin for code of conduct? Because that is the next item.
so you brought up at the beginning of that conversation about appropriations. What does that have to do with appropriation?
What does
Are
what
you
have to do?
just the math and,
No, those are separate things. I just make separate comments.
okay. All right, moving on.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
the,
Oh, thank you to our team.
oh, okay, I was going to
Yes, thank
say,
you to the
there was
team.
a vote, you're the vice chair. And absolutely, thank you to our team. It has been refreshing to do a great deal of work around teaching and learning. It's been very, very rewarding. We have learned a lot, and we will continue to learn a lot. The next item is the code of conduct. I'll set this up for Mr. Seymour. And I just want to acknowledge the board pushed really, really hard on the code of conduct last year, and the results have been absolutely outstanding in terms of the volume of instruction that we can focus in on instead of running behind cell phones. The structure in schools is specifically in our secondary schools, absolutely much better place. And I want to congratulate our principals who continue to push. Still some work to be done, but ultimately outstanding push based on the volume of change that we experienced last school year. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Seymour for the presentation.
Thank you. Through the chair, first, piggybacking off of what Dr. Moore stated, we did not have a lot of work to do, but that validates the work that was done last year. Also, we want to commend Mrs. Heather Holden and Ms. Ashley Dowdell, who was really behind this project and kept everything together. In addition to that, our stakeholders in the district, in the community, and students and their feedback fed right into our plan of action Again, there was not a lot of changes, but we had everyone involved that made a difference in this process, and I wanted to thank them for that. I don't know if you guys want to go line for line, but what I will do is share all of the changes that took place, and if you have any particular questions, I don't need it yet. Okay. Any particular questions, we'll have Ms. Ashley Dowdell come up. But I'm going to name some of the changes that are mentioned. It was revised to improve readability, increased clarity. I did added section 3, student safety and health, and the appendix. Relocated appropriate content to each section, added clear and specific guidelines to private spaces and artificial intelligence. Revised current guidelines for bullying, vaping, and cell phones, and replaced and updated the forms that are now in the appendix. Also, they made it a little bit more colorful, and I think that that change really showed where everyone can go without searching so far. Actually included many colorful changes that you can recognize from page to page. That's to the creativity of Ms. Dowdell. New actions for elementary schools, and what one of the concerns was, and I think you guys brought that to our attention as well, is the difference between a high school student, 11th, 12th grade, being suspended 10 days versus an act occurring in an elementary school, which through the student code of conduct could be the same act, but at a younger age, the thought process is not yet there to make those great decisions that they need to do each and every day. So there is a lot of room in there for principals to make decisions based on the age of a child, and that wasn't in there before. Also, the additional notification and due process rights, it's been added, and all of the information as far as bullying must include 3 elements, and the 3 elements are defined within that code of conduct. And that will be, pretty much the updates that were made at that time. Any specific questions that you might have?
I do. If you can go to, just a comment first. On page 15, the addition of the language including AI for cheating and plagiarism. And then there's a line there that was added that says inappropriate use of AI would then be, let me pull mine up.
15.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll have Ms. Dowdell come up and join me.
Sure. Where is my, oh, here it is. So on page 15, there was an new language that was added to the first checkbox, cheating, plagiarism, including AI, and a new item that was added, in inappropriate use of artificial intelligence. I think both of those are great. I'm glad the committee is recommending that we add that there. I have concerns with AI. So if someone, and there may not be an answer right now, which is fine because this is all kind of somewhat new, the world of AI and how it's impacting our students. By the way, we had this conversation, I think, at our last workshop, it might have been, about AI, and I met with a student from Indian River State College. The student is taking economics, I think advanced economics. The professor is mandating making students take their quizzes and exams using AI. I'm like, is that possible? You have to use a particular platform for this class to use AI to develop your answers and then have AI, I guess, help you think through whatever. And I was shocked. And this was an economics class. Like, I think that crosses the boundary of, free thought and, the use of AI. It really crosses the boundary. And just because people are doing it doesn't make it right. And we have an opportunity to make sure that we don't allow, even though the world is moving in the direction of artificial intelligence, we have to be the body that says, up until a certain point, and then we're gonna stop, full stop. It doesn't go any further than this. Because we remove the opportunity for students to be creative thinkers, to really, I want students to be able to write their own compositions using their own thinking, their own knowledge, their own, learning, and not depend on artificial intelligence to help them create that. That's the kind of person that I'm looking for, to educate. And so why I support this is for that reason. However, if a student receives this inappropriate use of artificial intelligence, we have to be able to support the principal or the parent in saying, well, where is that definition? What are examples of inappropriate uses of AI? And so you may not have that answer here, because I know sure enough it's going to come up at some point. So we have to develop, or you all have to develop, some way of saying this is inappropriate or that's inappropriate. And what would that be?
So we do have I don't know if this is on.
Okay.
Now it's good, okay. We do have a generalized definition in the glossary that we added, and it states that computer systems that are taught to automate and perform tasks that typically require human intelligence is what AI is considered. AI includes a variety of applications and tools, including, and we have this in quotes, generative AI such as ChatGPT. So that's kind of our general definition of what AI constitutes at this time. And then we also have...
is that in this? Did I miss that?
Yes, it is on page 51 in the glossary.
Oh, the glossary, okay. Mhm. So, okay, let me come back to 15. Can we put an asterisk or a little note on the bottom for definition, see page 51?
Yes, and I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because all of the items throughout that have a glossary definition, they're linked. They're hyperlinked, and I'm not sure that we added that. Let me see. That one does not have it. So they are all hyperlinked, and it states that at the beginning of the document that everything that is underlined is hyperlinked. So when we actually go to print, this will have a line under it. So I'll need to go back and add that hyperlink.
Okay. So the assumption for someone reading the definition, it just says such as. Is it important for us, and I guess this would be a legal issue, would it be important for us to say but not limited to? Which means it could be anything else.
Is that in the form of a question to me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Through the chair, I think that such as is open-ended, but if we wanted to make it absolutely clear that it was open-ended, to add including but not limited to the following makes it, from a legal standpoint, all the more. But either one is an open-ended definition.
So such as, but not limited to.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I just want, because this is such a new arena for us, fairly new, I just want us to be able to have the latitude to determine what would be inappropriate if that comes up. Something else, page 30 on bullying. Let me go back up. Okay, so last year's Code of Conduct Committee, there were a lot of people who were present, and it was there were a lot of changes. This year, there weren't that many, because last year, everybody did really well at changing the Code of Conduct to adhere to not only new statutes, but to really make sure that we are embracing and practicing zero bullying and, really coming down on using electronics in the classroom. However, this here looks like we're adding, this year, to my understanding and to my knowledge, and I might be wrong because I haven't seen the data and it hasn't been brought up, but the information on bullying has not really been an issue as it has in the past. And I'm thinking that might be the case. I might be wrong, but I'm thinking that might, which is a good thing if I'm correct, which would really, I think, be a complement to the changes that we made in last year Code of Conduct and how it's being implemented in the schools, right? Zero tolerance. If it happens, like we only had 3 consequences for offenses, and that was it. Now it looks like we're adding more things to do, which might be the right thing to do, but I don't want to reduce the mindset that we were in last year and then have us, take 3 steps forward and then wind up taking 6 steps back. So all of these that were added here for the outcomes of bullying, can you talk a little bit about them, please?
Yes, of course. So we actually received feedback from all of our administrators, again, ensuring that they had a voice in this process because they are the ones who have to, live it day in and day out. So our elementary school principals specifically expressed some concerns about assigning an automatic 10-day out-of-school suspension for their students. There's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of things to consider, especially with our younger students. And so what you see here is something different only for elementary. So we have that top.
I see it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so we have that top section is for our K-5, and the second section is what we currently have in place for all students, K-12. So this would now simply provide another avenue for our elementary administrators to really be able to provide them supports and really make sure the students understand what bullying is. It gives them multiple opportunities to just have those supports in place for their students. You see that there is a safety plan that's involved with specific interventions. The parents should, we would request that the parents be involved in creating that safety plan, but also really focusing on so many times we focus on the potential victim, which is important, but we don't support that potential offender with learning new skills and strategies to be able to cope with any challenges that they experience.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm looking at the chart. I totally didn't even see the grade there, which I should have, and I'm grateful. That makes total sense. I'm glad that you clarified that. And then, Mr. Seymour, we talked the other day, and I can't find the page, about that one item that needed to be changed, the language.
That was the attendance.
Yeah, where, for after-school.
Yes, extracurricular activities, it was sitting at 90% of attendance is necessary for a student to participate in the programs, and it was recommended that it move to 95%.
So what we did in speaking with principals is they already have plans in place to create contracts with students. So we were suggesting you modify the language to ensure that the school has the opportunity to create a contact to maximize students' participation while at the same time addressing the behavior of attendance. So in speaking with principals, in some ways we were shackling them doing more or doing less based on a prescribed number of 90, 95, whatever it was. So hearing from the principals, put it in the code of conduct, that will help us enforce what we currently already have in place. And the reality is each student's scenario may be a little bit different. At the beginning, in a to say it from the words, the mouths of principals, the first day of school, if you have a fall sport, everyone has 100% attendance because it's the second, third day of school. Versus what you do with a student in a spring sport may be different, where he needs to be placed on a contract and maintained enrollment prior. So the intent was right, but speaking with the practitioners, we were actually not doing them justice we want to have a high expectation, so we put it in there to make sure that they have that plan in place and give them the ability to do what's best for the kid and ultimately to improve attendance.
Okay, so what we talked about then is no longer here, and what it does say, just for clarity, is each secondary school will have student attendance requirements and an incentive plan for participation. That language has
Correct.
changed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I
Right.
was in the same place. I agree I think this is important. I like this language. We do have a policy for required attendance, just in general, so you would think that, it would be common sense to kind of lean more towards what's in our policy for this, but I think you're right. We need to have a little bit of leeway, because we might say 95, and then that student who has 94 or 92% attendance can't participate, or that student who has 50% attendance because of their parents' issues, but are great academically, they don't get a chance to participate. But this actually allows principals to make that decision. I would say when you are in those conversations, of course, we don't get to determine day-to-day operations, but I'm sure you and your staff will ensure that there wouldn't be, I guess, favoritism, and that there wouldn't be students who have a little bit, leeway given to them, but not to others. So
100%.
we just want to be able to allow everyone the opportunity to participate if it is possible. And I would also say that a student participating in an after-school activity is more likely to be successful in the classroom, more likely to be present, and more likely to kind of push that parent, like, hey, I want to get to school, get me to school. So thank you for the changes. Thank you for the work this year. I do appreciate, we are coming, I think, and again, I'd love to see the discipline data, but, I think we're moving in the right direction as we did last year, so thank you so much for that.
Anybody else? Dr. Jones?
Thank you very much. The format is very nice, and I see last year a lot of work was done, and it was easy to see the changes. Do you know, in general, Mr. Seymour or Ms. Dowdell, are our bullying reports down?
Yes. On average, what we've done is put the process in place. As you know, now we have a school-based threat management team and a district level as far as a state level. So much of the work goes into training the trainer, the teacher, the coach, the disciplinarian. And as those things and that training comes about, what we find is a lot of the issues that might be deemed as a bullying
Right.
incident sometimes is substantive. And so to the lighter level. So I think the training makes a big difference, and we pride ourselves on giving that training each and every year. This year, Dr. Tracy Crawford met numerous times to train every individual that will be making that decision. Every campus administrator has one contact person in addition to 2 others. Also, from a district standpoint, we are also involved in all of those activities at a point that we've never been before. So I think that's going to make the difference in the numbers.
And I like the information you shared with elementary principals and how they have to really look at that. It's different. Dr. Moore, I brought this up to you. I know we were at the point where kids with cell phones were going to alternative school, but I think I had asked you, let's say they came in January. They're not there through December if it's just cell phones. Am I correct there?
Through the chair, once they earn their way back, and I know we say they're going there because of cell phones, but they're going there for continuous
Correct.
disruptive behavior.
Correct.
And outwardly being defiant time after time after time after time. One of the things they've added to this plan is the stipulated agreement, which is also at the request of principals, which clearly articulates the contract between the student, the parent, and the school, which is the step before you actually end up in the alternative school. So it is a good thing at the end of the day. I got sent there for a cell phone. No, you got there because you didn't uphold your end of the bargain. And teachers are here to teach you, not police cell phones.
Thank you. Do you know what our attendance rate is right now with elementary, middle, high school, or?
So it varies and gets obviously worse as you go down. I think our overall attendance is 91.3,
Okay.
which is not where we would want it to be. We want to be between 94 and 96 average daily attendance, and
Right.
that would be the total K-12 space.
I do look on Power BI, but I wasn't sure where we were on that. In talking about extracurriculars, they are the best dropout prevention program we've ever had. And I like that you're looking at it for principals. When I was at the high school and then at the FHSAA, basically if the students weren't there all day, they didn't play in the game. Now, we did have an excused doctor. If it was legit, we call the doctor and so forth. But yeah, you need to look at that with the principals to see what's happening there. But when they are involved in anything extracurricular, band, drama, art, athletics, it's a plus. Thank you.
Dr. Pasca?
Sounds like the changes we made to the student conduct have improved the learning environment based on what you guys have said. Is that right?
100%.
Okay, good. And so far, in general, it's been well received by staff and teachers at the schools.
Through the chair, I think principals were a little nervous the first couple of weeks of schools, but stay the course as they did, and they all would thank you. Every single principal will say thank you.
Okay. I mean, I think it's also important to note that there were major changes that were made, and we all contributed and worked together to make those changes. I think that's something to shine a light on. And obviously, we're in the phase of continuous improvement, and what can we do to improve this and make it even better. And part of that is obviously trying to help this being implemented continually in the classroom setting. I'm sure there are certain schools or classrooms where it's harder to maintain this policy. And as a district, I just want to make sure we're supporting those classrooms to, maybe it needs to look a little bit different in one school versus the other. If they have continued issues, it may make sense to encourage them to think outside the box, maybe having a spot to put the phones in as you enter or something to that effect, but encouraging them to continue to try to incorporate this and follow the policy to improve the environment. Thank you.
I was actually walking in a school when I heard a teacher say, "It's not my policy, it's the school board's policy." And I thought that was entertaining because I thought,
Maybe
well,
she
good,
saw you.
that's fine. I'm okay with it because, it's the rule's the rule. But what I hope is happening is everybody's following through with the rules. And you know the rule that I saw that people weren't following through with, so I wanted to make sure that we address that. Because as soon as you let one little thing slip, everybody else looks at that child and says, how come they can do it and I can't? And so that's when it gets to be a real problem. Can we look at page 16? On page 16, tell me about the ALTOS program not being the first round of intervention anymore for level 3 behavior.
So that was removed because what we found, our secondary administrators were almost hamstrung. So they were saying, okay, I've got this offense that has occurred, and I would prefer to send the student to ALTOS, but I can't. So I'm going to assign out-of-school suspension first. And then the second time, if an offense occurs again at this level, then I can assign them alternative to out-of-school suspension. And they said that's kind of backwards. It doesn't really make any sense. And so they requested that we remove that language so that way, if necessary, if appropriate, that they could assign an alternative to out-of-school suspension prior to assigning OSS.
And they know the kids better than we do. Certain kids will react differently to different types of punishment. I had students who would I did Saturday school. And I had kids who loved spending time with me on Saturday. So I thought, okay, that's not working. We need to fix that. So I'm all about the administrator doing whatever is right to, you know, make sure the child is following the behaviors that they need to follow. So that's fine. Page 24, search and seizure. Let's talk a little bit about that a second. So where it says search and seizure, and we have the right and the responsibility and everything else, this document right here, we used to hand to parents, right? Okay. How do we do it now? It's just in focus, right? Where they can see it. They don't really read through it all. I remember every year reading through this with my children. Every year, especially my high schoolers. We'd read through every single thing so they were very aware of what could happen if they didn't toe the line. That concerns me that we're not making it, like, I can't say mandatory to go over it with your child, but stressing the importance of going over this with your child.
So I think that would be a little difficult to ensure that that happens. I agree with that, but you gave me a wonderful idea. So each year we have our Code of Student Conduct training for all of our stakeholders, our staff, our administrators, and then of course our students. We could add a piece to that training. We could add a focus on search and seizures and what that looks like to that training to ensure that all of our students do receive it, whether or not their parent reviews it with them.
I think they need to have that heads up. You know, of some of the things that we've had happen and some of the comments that were made, well, I didn't know that my child could, you know, not only that, but it was who could do it. You know, does it have to be a female with a female or male with a male? So I think that's important to go over with the students.
Two things. And when you do the assurances of the opening of schools, the parent is acknowledging that they have reviewed it. And I know that that's tough, but then we can go back and pull that information up. We've also implemented a system where each principal at the opening of schools and returning in January has a school-wide assembly with a very standard agenda where we're going on over what would be the non-negotiables, and this being one of them. So multiple points of conversations regarding when we're covering this need-to-know information.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good one to bring up in January again, because, you know, school's already halfway through and they're starting, well, it's spring and they're, you know, they're starting to feel their oats a little bit. So I think not to scare them, but to let them know, this is the policy we're going to follow through. And I think, you know, if they know that, then that is a deterrent. That's what we want it to be. And on page 26, it says firearm. Can you define what a firearm is?
Well, I will have Mr. Teskey, who's my safety specialist, because there are details that make the difference.
Yeah,
But
I'm wondering, like pellet gun versus, would that be included in this as far as this goes?
Well, if you went back to the definition that we just left, it included guns of any type, including air and gas-powered guns, whether loaded or unloaded knives, so it does provide a little bit more justification or rationale.
So through the chair, in law enforcement's eyes, an airsoft pellet, BB gun pellet, or anything operated by an air cartridge is not considered a weapon.
Okay, so they have a different type of punishment for bringing that to school? Would there be a punishment?
There should be.
Yes, there
To
would be
me,
a
to
consequence.
me, it's a
Yes.
threatening piece of equipment that you're bringing to school for a threatening reason.
So that, excuse me, that could still fall under weapons possessions. It could still be considered a weapon. It doesn't have to be categorized as a firearm to be a weapon,
Okay, I just want to make sure that
which
we're
is a
looking
level
at,
4.
because, you know, we've had those issues. Okay,
And through the chair, just one note too, what really determines if it's going to be a real cessor is the way in which it is presented to other people. So if it is used as a threat and other people are intimidated by it, that escalates
right.
the
okay.
procedure.
Page 27. At the top section, at the very bottom, on the last line, it says increase adult supervision at campus hotspots. So what are we referring to there?
So hotspots was a part of the language in previous iterations, and typically we're referring to those restrooms, we're referring to maybe those stairwells where there's kind of a hiding spot, so to speak, that a camera may not be able to pick up. Our students actually asked, when we met with our students for their feedback, to include that language that you see there in the green, including unsupervised areas. So they felt like that would help kind of further expand what that would look like.
That's what I thought a hotspot was, an unsupervised area, but now I get it. So it's like it could be that, or it could be a heavily trafficked area.
Correct.
Okay. And then page 33. First offense for Florida Tobacco Prevention Program, and it's crossed out elementary. Why? We had one.
Yes, so it would still be in place for elementary, but it would be in place for all students, K to 12. So it is available for all grade levels, and again, this comes from our students. Our students said, why would this not be available for us too? We're talking about our students from 6 to 12.
So they're including elementary.
Correct.
That's what I wanted to know.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 34, it says assign out-of-school suspension from 4 to 8 days to 3 to 6 days. Again, giving the principals leeway on what they want to do? Okay.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, that's fine. And 35, this is the big question I have. Right above where it says disciplinary procedures, it says a level 2 behavior, open defiance, insubordination. So if you're looking at, let's say a student willfully enters a restroom that they're not supposed to enter. Okay. What up here it's saying that's a level 2 behavior. Does that align with the new law though? It's a
Yes.
level 2?
Yes, that's why it's added.
It's not a level 3.
So the law states that it is simply a student refusing to follow directions. It's not the actual act of entering, it's the refusal of leaving.
Okay, what if they entered?
There is nothing in the law that stipulates if they enter, it's the refusal of leaving. If they enter, of
Oh,
course.
the refusal of leaving. Okay.
Right, so if any of those individuals, and this is directly from the law, teacher, administrator, or school safety officer comes in and directs the student, you must leave now, and the student does not comply, then they are out of compliance with the law, and that it is considered a level 2 offense.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're following the law, that's all. And then on the top of that page, oh gosh, second paragraph, second sentence, it says for students requiring a restroom or changing facility that is not designed for their sex, I think it should say biological sex. Because all the others do. You might want to put that word in there. I
Okay.
think it's important. I think that follows along with the law. And then on page 47, on the first boxed area, the last check mark, it says that items must be connected to our Wi-Fi or to our internet, right? And we know, because social media messages that you investigate and stuff, kids have posted videos, they posted social media stuff, and they're not posting it through getting it from our internet. They're doing it through another way. So if a student posts a video of a fight or a picture of something, obviously they didn't do it on our internet, right? And so if this is one of our rules and they signed it, what's the punishment there? If, okay, they've posted the video, it's gone viral or it doesn't go viral, but another student's face is out there. What's the punishment for that?
So that falls under the next page, on page 48, under major cell phone or other wireless communication device violations. So this is what we had in place last year. So if they distribute any type of material, like what you were referring to, it is considered that major cell phone violation, and it's an automatic 10 days out of school suspension.
Okay, with a reminder that they're using another source of internet. We can't block those, right?
Cannot block other,
Hotspots.
I don't know if they can
It
be
would be there,
blocked.
through the chair, I think we've had maybe 3 or 4 of those incidents all year long.
That's it, this year?
This year.
Because it has been a problem in the past.
Yes, the new code of conduct is almost completely
That's awesome.
eliminated because they're just not out in the time to do it. And they know, because it's reminded to them, this is what will this is what will happen. So we're in a really, really good space.
Okay, because I
in
know that was a
enforcing this.
huge problem.
Oh, it was specifically,
And it's being addressed because.
well,
of
it was,
that.
the majority of it was in the middle school. And since they're completely away in the middle school, it becomes very, very hard. I think the one that comes to my mind was an off-campus after-school event. But since they were just exiting the buses, we kind of owned that event. And that was the consequence.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Page 34. In regards to offenses relating to vaping, THC, and drugs, one thing I wanted us to consider, and I know we discussed it last time, is if this is a student who has multiple devices, whether it be simply THC or nicotine, I think the response to the offense should be handled differently than if it was a single device. I know it's going to be referred potentially to law enforcement in any case, but I think our punishment or response to that incident should be different. Is it the same if there's multiple devices found, or?
No, we actually just assigned a student for having multiple. So once you have multiple, in our minds, it becomes with intent to distribute or sell or whatever the case may be.
So they basically go to like the third offense plus area if there's
You gotta
multiple?
go.
Okay, good. I mean, I think that's the appropriate response to protect kids in the community. You know, it's one thing to try to change the behavior of a student who is vaping or using nicotine or THC. It's very much a different thing how we respond to kids who are selling it in our school districts.
Absolutely.
Good point. Yes.
So maybe Mr. Teskey would need to come back, I'm not sure. But and I haven't found the Florida definition, but the Office of Law Revision Council, United States Code, it's 18 U.S.C. 921, defines a firearm as any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. B, the frame or receiver of any such weapon. C, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer. Or D, any destructive device, such terms do not include an antique firearm. And then, of course, there are more definitions there. So reading this definition, a BB gun, pellet gun, would fall under firearm. There's still a projectile.
But it's not an explosive, it's air.
Okay. I mean, is it explosive that the bullet explodes or that it's exploding a
projects it.
projectile?
Right.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not sure. And I'm only asking for clarity because
Sorry.
someone who comes in with a pellet gun or a BB gun shouldn't have the same consequence as someone who comes in with a stick and hits some. I mean, you can do some pretty significant damage with a BB gun. And it wouldn't be considered a gun, BB gun, a handheld gun. It would have a different name to it. So I still think that it's pretty significant. We shouldn't overlook it.
Through the chair, I don't think that we overlook it. Mr. Chesky was giving the legal definite,
Yeah.
or what police consider to be a device. Ours, we look at it differently. When you have it, you're disrupting the function of school. We may be going on a lockdown. So once you have it on a possession, it will end up with a 10-day with a request for expulsion.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair,
I just spoke.
So I think the key word there is the weapon must expel a projectile using an explosive. So airsoft, air cartridges are not considered an explosive. But under the assessor definition, toy guns, cap guns, BB guns, and pellet guns are not. But to Mr. Seymour's point, it's all in the way it's used, the way it's presented in a threatening manner. So the simple possession of it, law enforcement won't press charges on that student for a weapon if it falls into that criteria, but that doesn't mean the code of conduct can't hold students responsible for their actions. Because their examples here simply state a pair of scissors or a letter opener can be
Right.
considered a weapon.
Right.
So it's all in the use of it, but for the law purposes for arrests, a BB gun or a cap gun would not.
All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, one other thing I was going to say is thank you for looking at root cause analysis when you're looking at the bully, the person that's doing the, because there's a reason why they're bullying. And you can dig down really deep and find out some really sad things that are going on in their life. So instead of throwing away a kid, you know, we're here to educate the child. So if we can attack it, not good term. If we can deal with the bullying early and help that child understand the reasons why their behavior is not appropriate, and getting down to why are they actually doing that. Maybe they were bullied or something happened in their home, or their neighborhood or wherever. But I think that's really important that we do that, because otherwise they're just going to continue to keep bullying other people. So, thank you.
All right, so before we move on to the next item, just because I have it in front of me, our next board workshop and board meeting is scheduled for March 18th. Sorry, our March workshop and board meeting is scheduled for March 18th. On March 19th, this facility is used for elections. So we've been working with the elections office. Unfortunately, they need the entire day to set up and calibrate and make sure those machines are appropriately recording individuals' votes. So the city manager has allowed us to take our show on the road, both for our workshop and our board meeting, using the chamber at the county office. So
City or the county? You
The
said
county.
city and then, okay.
I think the county. So
Okay.
we will, when we notice the meetings, we'll have them at the county office, both workshop as well as our business meeting, and I'll appropriately email the board and do all the notifications following today's meeting. And now we are going to move on to our policies. We are children of continuous improvement and learning, so we will present these policies as they were presented to you. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
We're coming up on the 2-hour mark. Does anybody want to take a break?
No. Feel free to go.
Are we good?
We're good on this
Okay.
side.
Keep going.
So we will present, each cabinet member will present their specific item. Board members have been briefed on these items. We will take questions as we move through. If there are no questions, we'll just continue to move through. The overwhelming majority of these policies are simple updates and alignment with state statute. So the first policy is actually a technical correction being presented by Mr. Bass, and we'll just continue to follow the flow.
Yes, through the chair. Okay, there we go. First one is policy 0141.2, conflict of interest. The technical correction was the Florida statute 112 needed to be added to the policy, so the only change you'll see in that, if you scroll down to the very end, is where the noted Florida statutes are. All right, the next one I have is actually 3 policies broken up over the 3 sections. It is policy 1139.01, 3139.01, and 4139.01. This is all indicating discipline of staff, and in accordance with the new statute 553.8659 paren B, Florida statute, about individuals entering a restroom and changing facilities designated for the opposite sex on the premise of an educational institution. We had to indicate the discipline process that we would put in those policies, and that is the only change in that. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Come on, let's go. Come on,
Okay, through the chair, we have 11 policies. The majority of these policies are just technical corrections or updates, revisions that will align to state statute and Florida code. Dr. Shafty will go through those with you and answer any questions you may have.
Sure. Through the chair, the first one is 2120, school improvement. That is a technical correction that impacts many of ours, adding the substantial mathematics deficiency. So that language was added to school improvement, as well as the legal citation towards the bottom of the policy. Okay. The next one is policy 2270, religion in the curriculum. This falls under programs in the 2000s book, and the statement that was deleted fits better with policy 8800, which is the operations. So that was removed with the reference to see policy 8800. Then policy 2271, articulation and access to Florida college system institutions, is a technical correction, meaning just Florida Administrative Code is added to the legal citation.
Okay, through the chair, policy 2452, disclosure of security policy and crime statistics. This policy itself just names the procedures that should be in place in case of an act such as our assessors. Of course, we follow the Florida Safe Schools policy and reporting, so we cover that. In addition to that, the TCTC student handbook on pages, let me see, I think it's 86 through 91 covers the process and how students are to report, and explains also the discipline issues that would occur if they get involved in such an act. In addition to that, there are portions of this that we're going to add to that booklet as well, and that is to come, and we've met with Ms. Shields to make sure that she follows through with this, and she had a plan of action, which definitely fit the state guideline. Also, 2460, I'm sorry, we got one in between that.
Okay. The next one is policy 2455. This is a new policy, dropout prevention and academic intervention programs. It is directly, the language replicates Florida Administrative Code 6A-6.0521. All of the language is within that code.
Policy 2460 is just a technical change which adds the language, new reference notice of parental rights be provided 1 year before the student turns 18.
Policy 2520, selection and adoption of instructional materials. We follow all of the state statutes as it pertains to reporting by the superintendent, and this just reflects the common practice and the way of work to catch up the policy to expectations by the state.
I have a comment about that. So I see that the date has changed from July 1st to April 1st. So that means you kind of have to shift everything up, right? To be able to do that. So any purchases you make, then you need to have in place ready to order by April 1st? Is that what this is looking at?
Through the chair, Mr. Green has already taken away all of our money for the remainder of this year anyway, so.
We have to report to the state in the Florida Instructional Materials Portal by April 1st what we plan to requisition.
Okay, so what you plan to do, so we have to back that all up with all of the committees that meet and everything else. Okay.
Which fits how we did social studies
So we
adoption.
kind of moved it. Okay. I just want to make sure it's doable.
It will be.
All right.
So if we were to think about opening a classical education school, why would we fall, I mean, I know we're supposed to have an instructional adoption period, But it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to look this, because this is a charter school, it doesn't need to look, I mean, a magnet school. It doesn't need to look exactly the same as we have done in the past. We could adopt our own curriculum at any time. If we plan in advance, you know, hypothetically speaking, we can create our own committee to draft up our own curriculum at any point in time and teach, you know, that. So at some point moving down, I know this really isn't a question, this is really just a, I guess, food for thought. You know, when you come to us in the future with what it's gonna look like I'd like to know what you're thinking of in terms of that process.
Okay.
Because some of the traditional classical curriculum publishers are not, it's not at the top of their list to kind of bid for public schools to adopt their curriculum. So we might have a bidding process, but if they don't know about it,
Right.
you know, then we wind up with the worst of the worst, or in some cases, choosing the best of the worst. And we don't want that. We want the best of the best for a new school, you know, for the better outcome. So moving to, yes, sir. Go
No,
ahead.
I think we will include that process because it will be different. In a typical process, we're working down from the state's list that they provide in terms of approved curriculum. So we might have to be a little bit more proactive in advertising to different individuals the opportunity to submit requests, which will include that in the process.
And I don't know, and this is something that I don't know. So what I don't, and you might know, but if, for example, Ms. Besura says, you know, I found a curriculum, the publishers aren't responding, but I love this curriculum and I want us to vet it. At what point, or what, you know, where is her authority to say, you know, I recommend that our committee also review this? I think we can do that. I just don't know how we allow that to happen. It hasn't been done, because we've always done the traditional, you know, come down from the sky and, you know, here's what we recommend. But in this particular hypothetical scenario, with that.
As we're talking about it, I think Ms. Besura would probably reach out to them and have a conversation and say, are you aware and would you consider?
And if they are aware, they consider, but they don't know that, what if they're small? What if they are, I don't know. I'm just kind of,
I hear what you're saying. I think the team is extremely thorough in their work, and they will turn over every rock to identify all potential individuals who either write frameworks or curriculum, and we'll do our due diligence to make sure these organizations are fully aware and fully submitting based on our desire to give our community the best possible curriculum we can.
because I'm okay with that, by the way. I'm okay with your team saying, this bid did not come in, but I think it is in my expertise. I think it is very highly effective in whatever it's we recommended that the committee review this as well. I'm okay with that. I just, you know, that's my thought. And of course, we would take it from there. But since we're looking at the policy, and since we have spent so much time here on what that practice looks like at the district, that's the portion, we didn't have a new school that we were considering to open. So that's the portion that I know is not included here, and if it's not, then fine, we can kind of make it up as we go along. But if at some point when you do come to us, we might need to revisit this policy to say, let's include another paragraph that shows us what that would look like for opening up a new school or a classical model.
You're going to say what I think you're going to say.
Yes, through the chair. That is actually already in this policy on the second page, non-state adopted instructional materials, and it provides a roadmap for us to do exactly what you're saying.
Dr. Jones had a non-state adopted
We
instruction.
have state adopted and
Yes.
non-state
Wait.
adopted.
Yes. Okay, I see it.
We've-
Thank you.
We've been very careful about going with state adopted. Are we going off that now?
Through the chair, the policy, there is a state-adopted process,
know.
which we typically do for all schools. The policy does allow us to do, whether it's a supplemental curriculum or a non-state adopted, there's a similar but different process that we would have to follow.
But I'm just saying, if you look back at our board meetings, not only since I've been on here before, but not going with state adopted, we've always had a concern about that or questions. Correct, Ms. Becerra?
Through the chair, you are absolutely correct, and I think that that is, the majority of our schools will continue to go through that process, but it makes me think back to when one of our schools did use Singapore math.
Yeah.
It did not go through that same process. So there is an opportunity here for us that does provide that roadmap to make sure that we are going through the process for curriculum that may not be on a state's bid list.
And also, again, just to review, because I want to make sure I'm clear on this, we're still using state standards, so all of our other schools would continue to use Amplify if we choose?
Correct,
And-
and I think the assurance that we have through policy here is when a school or a set of schools wants to use something outside of the state-adopted material, there's a board-approved process in which they must follow. So Singapore math is a good example, because we all like Singapore math. But what if it was a math curriculum that was 4 years below grade level, not aligned to the standards? The policy protects the parent, the student, the school to make sure that it is being vetted and it is in fact aligned to the policy that's in place. You won't have, through this policy, a recommendation come to you to approve a supplemental or a non-state adopted curriculum that isn't going to make sure that we're at the standards and exceeding the standards.
So could our other schools, I guess magnet schools, start looking at stuff that maybe they want to emphasize? Are we going to give that option to other schools? Maybe they want to change something.
But through the chair, we don't know what's going to change either. So I think you allow the process to figure out, Amplify is an absolutely outstanding curriculum. It is one of many components that we have in place that has led to us being the most improved school district in the state of Florida. When you look at, we were very, very critical. I will always say the disparity in what was being taught and the lack of alignment. Bless you. Y'all make me feel bad for not saying bless you. It was absolutely out of control. So I don't think I would be overly willing to say, hey, everyone come up with your own curriculum. We have a district office in curriculum and instruction who is doing all of the research, making sure that we're aligned at the standard and above the standard.
And Dr. Moore, I agree 100% with Amplify. I'm just saying, though, this new school, if this is the way it goes and the students, the parent survey goes like that, and this is what they want to do, they would be able to adopt something other than Amplify. Am I correct in saying that?
No.
Okay, tell me what I'm incorrect.
They still have to go through the procedure, which would include the district office. So we were looking at the procedures that we would follow. So it's not in isolation, or it's not every,
Okay.
we're not running the wild, wild west where we can do this, that, or the other. You can have a theme, and you can
Right.
build a theme in.
Right.
And in the process of what we do create, there may be pieces of Amplify that's involved in what would be the new school if we get consensus from our community that that's what we want to have. So, and it may include other things. IB includes other things.
Correct.
So this isn't something that's not being done. It's being done across the district with, supplemental curriculum to enhance to their visual performing arts, to whatever that theme would be. So
Okay.
I don't see it being drastically different, but there is from a board's perspective, there is a policy in place that protects the quality of curriculum that our students are being exposed to.
Correct. I just remember when we went through social studies, we were not waiving from state adopted.
Right.
So that has been an issue, and it's been an issue even before this. So I just want to be clear when we share this whenever it comes down the pike. That's all.
I got
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Becerra, for bringing this section up, because I completely forgot about this section. Just to kind of confirm here, it's not just that it's written in our policy, it's that the statute, Florida law, allows school districts to go one of two routes. The first route is to go through the state-adopted instructional materials route. They have their process, they recommend to us their top, whatever, 3 or 5, and then we have a process in which we select a committee, makes a recommendation to the board ultimately approves that state-adopted. The other route is an option where the board, the district, or the board can choose something else that's not on that list. And even though in the past, traditionally, which happens with, a majority of the school districts, is they choose the state-adopted route, it doesn't mean that that's the only route that's available. It doesn't mean that that's the only right route. There could be something else for some other topic, for some other, curriculum. We can, by law, have the option to choose something else, somewhere else, and that is within our rights, within statute, and within our policy. So now that you pointed it out, I'm glad that you did. And we have never had a new school of this type or proposed to be proposed. So I just think we should be a little, like you mentioned before, nimble and open-minded to doing things maybe a little different than what we have done before. And that's the whole idea of opening up a new school, is being flexible and not always thinking inside the box, but think outside the box.
Whose turn?
Still ours.
Okay, go ahead.
Policy 2522, that's our objections to adoption or use of instructional, library media, or reading list materials. We learned from the recent committee meeting that there was some contradictory information in there regarding confidential voting. So with Mr. Ansbacher's assistance, we made sure that the policy was aligned to comply with Florida statute as a committee operating in the sunshine.
Question? I see, I skimmed it, but is there a spot in here where it talks about, I see at the very beginning it says, a parent or legal guardian of a student in the district and/or, so they crossed out and they put or, a resident of the county can object, which is fine. How about at board meetings when they can read the verbiage? Because that didn't change under the law last year.
No.
Okay. It may change this year, I don't know, but right now, that's how it is, correct?
Correct.
It needs to be a parent. Okay,
Correct.
I'm just curious.
I believe that's in 1069.
Okay.
Then we have 2623, student assessment. That is just revised in accordance with Florida Administrative Code with test administration and security.
The next policy is 5111.01, homeless students, and it simply adds a definition around substandard housing in the definition section.
Okay, the next one is 5410, student progression. That is simply a technical correction, once again adding the substantial mathematics deficiency. Still us. 5410.01, promotion, acceleration, placement, and retention, also a technical correction to make sure that we had the substantial math deficiency as well as Florida statutes 1008.25, which is the statute linking to student progression. Then we have policy 54, or no, did I skip one? 5420. That is reporting student progress, and we added again the mathematics deficiency to that one. Then we have, not it? No, it's fine.
So the next policy is 5460. This is in regard to graduation requirements. This is aligning the policy and adding verbiage related to underage waivers to take the GED. In addition, there is an added legal notation at the bottom. 5465, again, general education development tests. This provides an update to include the language regarding the underage waiver for a GED. In addition to that, there is a requirement to include the process to appeal a denial of an underage waiver, and that process has been included, as well as the contact, the GED coordinator for the district. That information has been included as well.
Policy 5780, student parent rights, and that also has the substantial mathematics deficiency.
The next policy is 6322, construction, contracting, and bidding. It simply adds an exemption to competitive bidding where we can piggyback other governmental contracts. It's the same exemption that already lives in 6320, and it just makes them align.
I actually have that one, Mr. Seymour.
Okay.
The next policy is 7440.01. It's in regard to video surveillance and electronic monitoring. It was noted by staff that this policy needed to be updated to ensure that we're in compliance with FERPA, as well as security, Florida Administrative Code regarding security systems. And so there was language that was stricken from there regarding the viewing of video recordings, and video recordings can be viewed only after being with exemptions that have been seen before a court and provided approval that way.
The next item is 7450, property inventory. It simply adds a new incident report instead of a police report for items that we know what happened to them. They were disposed of maybe because they were broken, and not requiring to file a police report as we would with a stolen item. The policy after that is 8305, information security. This aligns with State Board Rule 6A1.09550, which basically says we have to have someone appointed at the district to review online educational materials, terms and services, and privacy policies to make sure they align with FERPA and COPA, which we already have that in place with Ms. Carrie Wall, our Educational Instructional Technology Specialist.
Policy 8420.
Well, Mr. Seymour, there's one more in between there, 8330, student records. And it aligns well because it simply adds a definition of what an online educational resource are, apps or online websites accessed through the internet for educational purposes.
Okay, policy 8420, emergency management, emergency preparedness, and emergency response agencies. This identifies the public safety agencies to be involved in the development of policies and procedures. In that, we always include them in all of our FSAT procedures on our campus tours, as well as in our safety and security yearly meeting in closed sessions. All LEAs or agencies or law enforcement agencies, fire, EMS, give feedback and updates to school administration as well. Covers it.
And lastly, policy 8600, we will not be accepting this recommendation for the revisions as it does not apply to our transportation program.
So, Madam Chair, that is the policies. Just want to thank staff as well as Ms. Holmes, who is actually staff, for coordinating this work. The depth in which each cabinet member can speak through their area of expertise is just reassuring to me in terms of the quality of people that we have sitting at this table. But if there are any additional questions, staff would be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just thank you. How this is formatted as far as the policy, the title, and then looking up the research if you have a question is excellent. And I'm requesting a 10-minute break.
Okay, and before we do that, I'd just like to say thank you for putting it in numerical order and covering it that way for us. Because in the past, you've had us flipping all over the place, so we appreciate that. Anybody else? Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. It is 2:24. and 45 seconds, so we're 15 seconds early, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. The remaining items on the agenda are all items that will come before the board for approval in our upcoming meeting. They all have been briefed individually with staff. I think the next item will be presented by Mr. Seymour, and we'll just follow through Mr. Bass and Mr. Green.
Through the chair, each year we report our needs based on hardening our schools for safety purposes. This year, we will be receiving $253,311 for hardening our schools. This allocation itself is $133,913 more than we received last year. With these funds, they will be used to improve the safety and security school buildings based on 24 best practices from security risk assessment, which was completed by all district schools by section 1006.07. This will be brought to the table for approval. That's all that I have.
I have a question, just how many schools are we hardening?
Every school within our system, and then too, there
Oh,
are
I know
charter
with these
schools.
dollars, so how many
Charters also involved.
are we going to be able to do with these funds?
Well, how the funds are utilized, primarily we look at the need per school, and
Okay, so we don't have it earmarked yet, is that what you're saying?
we do in a sense because a lot of the work that needs to be done has already been recorded. So we know primarily what schools will need
Okay.
assistance.
All right, through the chair, I have the next item is the 5-year work plan. This is a plan that we have to do each year. Lists out our maintenance expenditures versus our revenues, and most important page is the first page there where everything balances out. So we are not spending more money than we were anticipating collecting. This was the document that originally DOE had held in releasing. Should have been released by DOE back in the fall, but is now, they've released it, we've completed it, and bringing it to you for approval.
I have a question. What major shifts had to happen in order for us to purchase more metal detectors?
That'll be coming out of safety and security dollars.
Okay, so not out of our 5-year plan then?
Not out of the 5-year plan,
Okay.
but it is in, there's a line item in there for those revenues, but it didn't affect our facility maintenance
It
plan
was just in that one
for security.
pocket of money?
Correct.
Okay.
The next item is the Thundercat Technology School Mapping. Last year, House Bill 301 appropriated funds for school mapping for first responders and emergency services. These will be macro and micro level maps, high level and then very detailed as to where hazardous materials are located, stairwells, Knox boxes, so that when conducting drills, practices, and in the case of any real emergency, everyone can access what they need by not interrupting any hazardous materials along the way. And there is a vendor that will be mapping all those schools. That's what you'll be approving. It's a piggyback contract, and charter schools are included.
Anyone? I have a question about that. In St. Lucie County, they have big, huge numbers on each of the buildings at a school for that reason. So when they come in, they know that's building 1, and they hear over the loudspeaker. I haven't noticed the big, huge numbers. Do we have them numbered differently here?
I'm going to have to turn that over.
I mean, they're very big down there. Very obvious.
Is this one on? Okay. Yes, part of the annual FSAT assessment that we briefed the board on in August, I did list wayfinding signage that was in there. So for the past 2 years, we have updated corridor and hallway signages. We did aggressively spearhead a project to where every school was numbered by corridor. You've seen 600, 800, 400 wings. So that is complete at all of our schools. The only school that remained unique was Sebastian River High School. We allowed them to keep the letter codes. We worked with law enforcement to do that. So For the past 2 to 3 years, I have had wayfinding projects within the budget. Our next plan is to do aerial numberings for helicopters. So I'm working with Physical Plant to start planning that project as well, so we can assist first responders from the air. But, maybe the signs you're seeing are larger than ours, but ours are visible, approved by law enforcement. We did walk it with them. So that is complete.
Yeah, I just want to make sure they're very aware of what the numbers are and where they're located.
Absolutely. So this mapping project is overseen by facilities, security, code and compliance, building. We're all working on this together. So providing those digital maps with those locations are crucial with the correct locations and the numbering systems.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
The
Dr. Johnson?
Just a comment, I just thank you as a former principal and knowing that our first responders know where everything is and where to go. It's very comforting.
Yes, ma'am.
The next item is a very routine item. It's surplus property. We'll be disposing of some items. The vast majority of items are technology-related, and almost all the items are 10 years or older, some in the 15 to 20 years. There's a few weight machines that are the same year that I started teaching. Wow, 28 years old. A washing machine and a pressure washer. The rest are computers and technology that are obsolete, and those will be going. We have a recycle program to try to recoup some of those funds, but they're not usable.
All right, anybody, I have a question.
Yes.
Like, I always find this entertaining, because I'm like, all right, how about number 2, fish farm?
The fish farm?
Yeah.
So that is 24 years old. I don't know that I would be able to speak to it, but it's from Oslo Middle School, and it looked like some type of a fish farm setup, and it was over $1,000, so it had to be capitalized at the time.
Okay, is it totally like useless, or is it able to be
Useless.
give away to somebody? Okay.
24 years old, I
Yeah, I
believe.
figured. Okay, I just find it entertaining, some of the stuff that's on there. Okay.
The final item, as we briefed, is E-rate is a federal reimbursement program that helps school and libraries upgrade technology throughout the system. They follow a different RFP process, request for proposals, than we do. So we will have to follow their process, which will end on March 1st, which doesn't align with a board meeting. So what we'll be asking you is a max spend of $300,000. That means we're going to buy $1.5 million worth of equipment at an almost 80% rate of return and only cost us $300,000. That process, we will find the most aggressive bidder. They're all federally vetted, and that's who we'll select. So I don't have a name of the vendor for you, but in the backup, you'll see the list of equipment, the network equipment that we are putting out to bid in that RFP. So that is a very, very lucrative way for us to increase technology at a minimal cost.
All right.
That's all my items.
That concludes my portion of the agenda, Madam Chair. You do have 3 items under discussion, plus the one that you added at the beginning of the meeting.
Right, okay. So the very first one says legislative update, so I just thought I'd give everybody a little update. I've attended 2 committee meetings, not on the Hill, but subcommittee meeting for FSBA. And this was interesting. I'm on the government, the U.S. government one. And we now, last year, we switched from the national organization that we used to belong to COSBA, which is a new organization that was newly formed with other states, because we didn't agree with a lot of the stuff that was going up to Washington. And so this group is a little more conservative. The one item that we have been discussing in detail was the legislative platform that COSBA is doing. And there was an item that I objected to and several others on the committee did. It was about school choice. COSBA said they don't want to have any funds go to school choice at all. Well, that goes totally against Florida law. So we couldn't agree with that. So that is the one item that FSBA is not agreeing with COSBA. Everything else they agreed with. So that happened last week. And then this morning I attended the committee meeting for the Central Florida Coalition. And the topic of choice was how to get teachers. and it's been the topic, you know. So I kind of mentioned how I got hired in the state, and they said, oh my gosh, you're right, we haven't, it's still around, but it's not like it used to be, and that is the Florida Teach-In. Florida Teach-In used to be huge. It used to be in Orlando. It was at a really, really nice convention center. And it was communicated well to other states. So I was living in Texas and heard about it, and I thought, and we were moving here, and I thought, oh, that's a great way to meet lots of different counties at the same time and see if I can get a job. And same time, I could take all my tests I had to take and apply for my license, my certification. Got it all done, one-stop shopping. It was great.
Nice, yeah.
All I had to do was pay for my room, basically, and the rest of it was, you know, available to me. And I had to pay for my certificate, application, stuff like that. But I was able to interview with lots of different places, although back then, Indian River didn't have any job openings because that was when, believe it or not, there was a waiting list to be a teacher to get into the counties. So now we're in the opposite end, and they used to have this wonderful thing with not that many jobs available. And I said, why aren't we doing it wonderfully now when we need so many people? And part of the issue is they're not communicating it well out to other places. If they put it out there that, hey, for these 3 days, you can come and interview with all kinds of different counties, you could take all your tests, you could apply to teach, I think it would go a long way. So several of us thought that maybe we could start putting some more requests to the DOE to make the Florida Teach-In a little more powerful. I think it still exists barely, right?
Is April 13th, 2024 in Lakeland this year.
One day,
And we have participated in it.
one day. And how many people do you get attracted to that? And it's in Lakeland, so it's not near a major airport. See what my point is? It was in Orlando. Come to Orlando, you know, everybody wants to come to Orlando when you're in another state. And then you got to go there for a couple days and then interview. I thought it was awesome.
We're seeing so many job fairs now are virtually. They're
Oh,
virtual.
okay.
So,
I get
you know,
that,
I
too.
know Miss Crisafulli participates in several throughout the year. They do go out to some school or universities and visit. You know, we've hosted our own. So that's.
I get that, yeah, that was before all that. But I think it was important that I could actually apply. Somebody sat with me, showed me how to apply for everything and take my tests. I could literally go sit and take the tests when I was there. And I did. I took all the tests I had to take. And I got it all done in one day. So that, to me, is the part that's missing. I don't know who we can say to that, but that was a discussion that came up at that committee. And then what's happening up in Tallahassee are the committees are winding down, and they should be finished, I think, this week. So that means pay attention to the bills, because that means if a bill has not gone through all the committees it's supposed to go through, it's on the docket for a committee, and if the committee doesn't hear it, it's dead. So I'm paying attention to a couple of really interesting ones that if they don't get heard by the committees this week, they'll die. So that's what happens. They just die a quiet death sometimes, and that happens. So that's my report on legislative update.
Did you want to do homeless?
I said like
now?
Latin.
No, I'll do homeless
Okay.
again. Go ahead.
All right, my topic is District Objection Committee, and as we start with our new round of book challenges, I just want to make sure I understood everything and that our public understood. First of all, thank you to all who serve on that committee. It's a lot of extra work, and I appreciate it. And I talked with Dr. Moore about this when challenges come up. As a board member, I'd like to know so I can read the book, because recommendations that would be coming to the board. So either Ms. Baser or Dr. Shafty, when will we know the challenges and then the reason for the challenge? When will those go to the committee? I know the next one's February 21st. I couldn't get to the last one, but I'll get to this one.
Through the chair, we will be presenting the documents on Wednesday, 1 week before the meeting.
Okay.
They'll be publicly noticed and available for all to see. We'll probably be phasing this in where we know we have certain books that are definitely ready to go. We are in a position where we're not sure about a couple of others. So rather than have them on the list, off the list, on the list, we will add them to the list as we are more certain.
Okay, and the reason for the challenge will also be on the list?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and Mr. Ansbacher, I didn't see all of the meeting, I watched most of it, but we received an email from you on October 31st regarding sexual orientation, gender identity, and CRT as it relates to book challenges. Could you summarize that a little bit for us?
Those are instructional material-based objections. I will say that with the caveat, as the chair pointed out, we'll see what the session brings this session, and additionally, there are multiple pending litigations, so as things stand, that is the position of the state.
And that's what you reviewed with the committee last week? I'm sorry, I haven't watched all of it. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And my next one dealt with minutes. I'm sorry. My next one dealt with minutes, and I attached for the board the state statute in our policy regarding minutes. And I certainly understand that when a board vote is happening, action time is happening, we have to record the minutes and the vote. In the state statute, Part B of 1001.42, it mentions the word vote about 4 times in action. And then our policy talks about vote. And when I talk with Mr. Ansbacher, I certainly understand we want to have everything correct, but we also are taping these meetings, and they're live, and sometimes I go home at the end of the night and say, did I say this? So I'm looking at it in YouTube. It's right there afterwards, because I'm thinking, okay, I did say that, but I just want to make sure that, you know, when we look at minutes, we just have to follow the law as far as the action and so forth. The interpretation discussion, does that need to be recorded? Because the reason I say that is that I don't need anybody interpreting me. I mean, I'm going to say what I want to say, but even if we interpret it and what if it's wrong and we go back, do we have to do discussion and interpretation as far as the law is concerned?
And that's a question to me, ma'am?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. The answer is the bare minimum that the statute and also 286011, the Sunshine Act, and multiple Attorney General opinions have said you need, and Robert's rules, I think, is consistent. 48.2 says the focus should be on what is done, not what is said. Now, having said that, if you look at the Attorney General opinions,
Yes.
They also provide that it's appropriate, not minimally legally necessary, but it's appropriate to go as far as to do a verbatim set of minutes. But it is legally sufficient to say, here's the agenda item, here's what the motions were on the agenda items, here's how the vote turned out. There is one clarification exception, both within the Attorney General opinions and within Policy 168, which was any other information required to be shown that would be sufficient for the public to understand the basis. So if there's a lot of debate, that can be fleshed out. And for what it's worth, one of the reasons that there are 2 reasons that the Attorney General has given for not requiring verbatim. One is, as you just pointed out, you're having a recording individual trying to extrapolate what each member of a board meant. And the other is, ironically, because the minutes speak for themselves, and that what individual board members say may not be the basis for the majority. And so all of that is, to sum up, if you have the item, you have the motions, you have the vote, that's the bare minimum, and you can flesh it out as circumstances warrant.
So, Dr. Moore or Mr. Ansbacher, if somebody asked for a verbatim transcript, I mean, what happens then?
Through the chair, we'd send them the link to the video.
Okay, all right. I mean, we do tape it live, and then we have it on YouTube right away, so I just wanted to bring that up, because I think it's important that obviously, when we look at state statute and our policy, that it talks about the vote. And I love the discussions that we have, but sometimes I'm not going to expect Ms. Morey to interpret it for me. So I would say, you know, this is when I started talking about it, this is what I said, and it's right there live, and then on YouTube by the time I get home anyway. So just wanted to share that with board members, see what they think, and
Anybody want to discuss either of those items? Because this is discussion. All right, then I'm going to bring up the one I added, which is homeless. Recently, I was at an activity, I think it was Science Fair, awards. And I just casually mentioned or asked about homeless kids, and I was given a number, and it kind of shocked me. And then I was given another number, which even shocked me more. So, Bruce, I asked you to kind of come up with some numbers for us. Can you tell us about the homeless population of students in our schools for the last 5 years?
So the homeless population in our district has ranged between 450 and 550 roughly students. This particular year, as of February 12th, in our student information system is at 491. Back in 2019, it was 441, and it's gone up and down around that since.
And one of the things I asked you is to define what it means to be homeless, like how many of them are living in cars or are they living with other relatives, you know, or in a hotel? What's happening?
So in our student information system and for reporting, we categorize those into shelters, shared housing, motels, and unsheltered. Just using this year's data, shelters and motels independently are roughly around 10% of the students are either in shelters or in hotel motels. Less than 2% are unsheltered, and the vast majority, 78%, are in what's called shared housing, which is housing of another person due to the loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason, sometimes called doubling up.
Couch surfing.
Couch surfing.
Okay. And what services do we provide and what services do we connect them to?
So I think that would be a good opportunity for Ms. Mallets to probably share some information, because I think you'd be surprised at the level of services and support that we do offer within our district. And that's something we could definitely provide if that was the direction of the board.
Okay, and the reason why I bring that up, board members, is because there's been a lot of talk recently about the homeless situation that's going on downtown and the begging and all that. And it seems to be being dumped on the city and then sometimes the county commission. And then I heard about these numbers and just said, you know, what is it we could do maybe as 3 government organizations together to have a conversation about it? Would you like to have a 3 governmental meeting and discuss this as a concern? Because, you know, a lot of people, you see certain people on the street, but you don't see kids. I saw one at Christmas time. I saw a mom setting up for her little baby, and she was begging on the corner by Chick-fil-A, and it just broke my heart. So are you agreeable to doing something like that?
I would love to. I think
we need a presentation first from Ms. Mallets and get some background information.
Love to.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to see what we can do as a group to more organized approach to this.
No, I agree, 100%. Mr. Green, what was the number that you provided again?
As of February 12th, 491, and that's a cumulative number. On any given day, it could vary, but that's students that have been reported as homeless at any time during this year in our student information system.
And how many total students do we have registered?
17,700 roughly.
Okay. And of these 491, do we know the percentage of how many students are elementary and high school? or
I don't have
secondary?
that information with me, but it is in our student information system, so we should be able to capture that.
That would be good
as
for
part of
the
the presentation.
presentation, yeah.
So something to keep in mind when we do have this presentation, the Florida Department of Education has, obviously all of our data. For the 21-22 school year, and they have it broken up separately, but for the 21-22 school year, they have way less, but they do it by assessment, so it's, how many of the homeless students are level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 to level 5. It is way less, but when we prepare for this presentation, it would be, and I don't know if we know it, but it would be, I think it would help our conversation if there were any data to indicate why there is such an increase. Overall, what that increase is and then why. Because if we don't know the root cause, if we don't have an idea, then then our conversation would be futile.
Well, I don't think it would be futile because it would be a good way to have a root cause analysis. In other words, discussing with everybody, okay, we have this homeless situation. How many homeless do we think we have in our county? How many are in the city? How many are kids? Where are they living? And what services are all around to provide for them? And why aren't they taking advantage of it if they could? This mom sitting there begging with her child near Chick-fil-A really bothered me because I thought there are so many services that I know are there for families. Does she not know about them? Is she new to the area? I couldn't talk to her because of the traffic that was running around. But it really bothered me. So that's why I thought maybe we should at least start a conversation about it.
Yeah, and let me just respond to that. I don't mean that it would be futile. What I mean is, to come to an end, what would that look like for us as a school district? Someone who is not a part of the school district, we can't really have influence over. But we can, for sure, over those who are within our school district. So that's really what I meant from that.
I think, I'm thinking more of a community effort of looking at homeless in a different light, because I think a lot of the stuff I read, it seems like it's the city's issue. No, it's the county's issue. And it's our issue. It's the community's issue. And I think that we need to see if there's anything that we know of services that are available that we can have some cross services with the county and the city. So I'd just like to maybe have the presentation first, and then I'm going to reach out to some county commissioners and the city council and see what their ideas are and their idea about maybe meeting.
Excellent idea.
Okay, I'll meet with the mayor and then Susan Adams, who's the, I believe she's chair now for the county. Okay, anything else? All right, then I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. It's 3:02.